Okay, thanks for being patient, everybody. First of all, good morning. Welcome to the SDTaP Demonstrators Phase 2 competition briefing event. My name is John Kingsborough. I'm Head of Creative Industries and Digital Economy at the KTN. I think you're here for one very simple purpose, which is to hear everything you need to know about this competition and to ask questions. We're going to try and give you all of the information that you need, but if there's extra stuff that you need, by all means, there's plenty of opportunity for today for you to ask questions. As well as the people here in the room, we've got some people online on the webinar, and we'll be filming today's event. So for those of you logging in, welcome, thanks for coming. And the film of all of the information that will be shown today will be available up on gov.uk in a day or so. So it's great if you want to take notes and make points that are relevant to you, but actually don't feel you have to, because the film for today and all of the information will be up online in a few days. So thank you. I'm going to quickly run through the agenda. There we are. I think you probably have copies as well. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to George from Innovate UK, who's going to give you the competition scope. This is phase 2, so we have run a competition about a year ago, phase 1, which was quite successful and had lots of applicants. And I think three projects have been funded from that competition. This is phase 2. So there are some slight differences between the first phase competition and this phase, but George will explain everything. Then we'll have a chance for Q&A. If you have any questions, please, if you do have any questions, raise your hand and there'll be plenty of time to answer those questions if we can. People who are logging on the webinar, also, there's a facility for you to be able to ask questions as well. And we've got some people here who'll be able to ask your questions to George and others in the room. And then after the question and answer session about the background and the competition scope, we have colleagues from the competitions team at Innovate UK, and they'll be coming up and going through questions like eligibility, the applications process, all of that stuff. So, and we hope that will be quite a comprehensive run-through of Innovate's online application system. So again, you'll have the ability to ask questions there. And then there's a relatively short lunch, and then the afternoon session we'll be hearing from an industrial case study from Jean-Paul. And then my colleague at the KTN, Simon Yarwood, is going to be running a session on how to write the very best application for Innovate UK competitions and how we at the KTN might be able to help you. And then later, some of you have said that you'd like to get up and tell the audience about your organisation. Some of you may be looking for collaborators on this competition call, and so that's when from 2 o'clock the pitches will happen. If you have prepared some slides already, that's fantastic. If you haven't, but would still like to get up and give a 2-minute pitch, then please see Simon Yarwood. He's at the back there. What we'll be doing is we'll be collating all of those pitches and we'll be publishing them on the KTM website later. For those of you who are online, the webinar finishes at the end of the formal bit of this morning, after the Q&A from the competition application team. But if you are online and you're looking for collaboration partners, please log into KTN and email us, and we can help matchmake you with people who are here in the crowd today, and we can help broker some collaborations. So I think that's all I've got to say. Feel free to tweet and take photos, etc., etc. We don't have a fire alarm fire alarm test planned, so if it does go off, then the fire exits are there. But otherwise, have a great day, and I think the kind of tone of today is pretty informal. If you could keep your questions to the Q&A sessions, that would be great, just so that we capture them properly on film. But otherwise, I think I'd like to hand over to George. If you'd like to welcome him to the stage, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So good morning, ladies and gents, and welcome to this competition briefing event. Welcome as well to the audience over the web. And thank you for the introduction, John. So the idea for today is to go through the competition that we launched last week. And this is round 2, just to put it a bit more correctly. We said phase 2 on the agenda and in other things you've seen, but it's actually round 2. There's no dependence with round 1, so this is a new competition using, if you like, the same context as far as the conditions and eligibility are concerned. So it's a separate competition, a separate investment. I'm part of the Digital Security by Design team at Innovate UK. We focus on digital security, cyber security, if you like, from the roots of the stack, from the hardware level, up to the applications and services, through different investments, ISCF, and the one that you will see here that comes under a different fund, if you like, and I'll explain how it works and the logic behind it. And I will be joined today by my lovely colleagues from Innovate UK, and you can see the names there, Dawn, Tammy, and Elaine. And the idea is for us to take you through the competition A to Z pretty much. I'll walk you through up to and including the scope, the technical scope. My colleagues will hopefully hand over and walk you through the process and the practicalities, what to take into account, our online portal, finances, setting up your budget, and so on, up to the how the assessment works, what to expect, and hopefully, if you are the one that will be celebrating towards the end, which I hope so, how to set up your project. Right. So, as a way in, if you like, why are we all here, right? So there are 2 things that bond us together today. So one is the opportunities that are brought about by the Internet of Things, right? The mass volume of devices, interconnected devices, they enable the way that we work, live, socialize, and so on. So that's the consumer aspect. And we've seen recently how the government, if you like, is proactive to design policies and regulations that protect citizens from using those devices in the home, in the consuming space, and so on. But also on the business side, so how can businesses use IoT to, if you like, decrease operation costs, increase asset utilization, increase the awareness of the business assets they have in place as well. But also IoT as a critical function as part of infrastructures, if you like, national infrastructures, which you will see in a minute that we focus today as well. So one eye is on the opportunities, as I said before. The other eye is on the challenges that come with those opportunities. The challenges is that those systems are becoming more and more important, increasingly complex, right? And that means increasingly susceptible and vulnerable to disruption vectors, you name it, from internal faults and failures to external threats and cyber attacks and so on. So we are approaching that, if you like, nexus of IoT and cybersecurity coming together, bringing different challenges, and there you come in to kind of think about how to address those challenges. And so this is all part of a program that we run at UKRI. It's called Securing of Digital Technologies at the Periphery. You already see from the words that we are embracing the trend that IoT is moving towards the edge of the network, as they say. You have those edge components, typically resource constraints that take on tasks typically handled by the cloud at the moment. So we're shifting towards the periphery, and that comes with extra challenges because AI is also coming to the fore, algorithms that use mass volume of data to reason, to recommend insights, to help our decision making, and so on. And so SDTaP was funded under the what we call Strategic Priorities Fund. It's a fund set up by Innovate UK, and the idea is to bring different elements of the organization, research councils, Innovate UK, to come together with strategic, if you like, ambition, strategic objectives, and join forces. Research from one side, innovation on the other side. You already see that the ambition is to set up a research and innovation center. It's virtual, which means that it aims to bring together the strengths that we have in the UK, strengths in IoT, strengths in cybersecurity and AI, and it branches off, if you like, to two main components. One is the SDTaP Research Hub, which is run by the Petras Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity IoT, or IoT Cybersecurity. And it's basically Petras handling grant funding from EPSRC to run calls for proposals. And they've already run those initial calls. They've funded, if I'm right, 15 catalyzer projects. Petras is a consortium of, if I'm right, 14 universities, partner universities that have, if you like, quite a big heritage from the Petras hub, as it used to be, and now extending, if you like, that lifetime, continuing on the cusp of new technologies, including AI, including the edge, and so on. And so if you want to know more how Petras works and how you can get involved in the calls for proposals, then you can access the Petras website. I think there's a new version coming up pretty soon. And then on the other side is the innovation part of the SDTaP, which is basically, if you like, fleshed out as the Innovate UK managed part. We have three main aspects. So one is the demonstrator projects that you are here today, and the round of competitions. The other one is the commercialization aspect, which is basically how to take a novel idea and help those innovators, if you like, to take it closer to the market, or at least produce something that comes out as a proof of commercial feasibility. That's the commercialization side. And we hope in 1 or a couple of years from now to be focusing on the international dimension as well, whereas UK, we should be focusing in terms of the new opportunities in the offshore markets, so to say, for IoT and security as well. And you can see the numbers as well in terms of the investments. We are spending pretty much 10 million for the demonstrators. Petras has the other 14, plus some additional elements as part of that. I said before that we had the competition, we ran a competition, we closed the competition, and we now have the projects in flight mode. That was round one, was launched early last year. And of course we ran a consultation with stakeholders to see where the trends and opportunities are. We shortlisted 3 priority themes, if you like, in terms of operational resilience related to the protection of data and the recovery of data in IoT, the intelligent control systems, emphasis on the building aspects, and on the verification as well. And last was the digital home and how to protect the occupants that use those IoT systems. And so that competition resulted in 3 projects. You can see the names there. One is addressing the iTrace, for example, is addressing those resource-constrained devices in a distributed deployment. And they are also focusing on critical scenarios involving end users. The Cyberstone is focusing on the gateway and putting emphasis on the security on the gateway, of course, as part of an IoT distributed deployment. And the last one is about how to use the in-life or through live system-on-chip monitoring novelties for critical applications like connected and autonomous vehicles. Now, today we're launching, or we are briefing you first time for this competition, round 2, as I said before. We are investing up to 4 million for collaborative R&D projects. And we have some top-level aims, if you like, coming into that competition. One is to bring together the strengths and capabilities we have, both from the research and the industry side, to tackle those challenges that have to be industry-focused. So think about how they link to productivity, economic growth, and so on. Not just exercises, for the sake of it, if you like, have to be anchored on requirements. Second is to enable that knowledge transfer from the world-class research base in the UK to the industry and enable that translation. Now, of course, that we expect that this will happen organically, if you like, in the way that you develop your projects and the credible, no doubt, arguments that you will put forward, right? So how do you envisage that if you like, a research aspect bonding in with the innovation aspect? The other thing is that you need to keep an eye on the commercialization from the early stages of the application. So it's not, if some of you may have already been involved, it's not about typical collaborative R&D. You come to the end of the project and you start wondering, what to do, who to approach, how to find end users. It's the other way around. Try to think early on how this is anchored on commercial exploitation. And of course, last but not least is the element of, yes, we address technology. This is what connects us together, if you like. But increasingly, IoT comes with a number of societal, if you like, challenges and aspects in terms of the public acceptance, especially if you aim to change the norm in cybersecurity, then how you prepare also the citizens of this world, of this country, to be better prepared, if you like, and accept that new shift. And so very specifically, when you sit on your desks comfortably to prepare your proposal, so think about it, those are the essential elements that you should keep in mind, right? So one is focus on cybersecurity for IoT systems. I emphasize here the IoT systems, and we'll come back in a minute to what we mean by that. We do encourage you to include artificial intelligence, including machine learning, algorithms that you think that are of interest and importance. And I say that because I said before, SDTaP is following the trends. It's following the increasing use of AI in different sorts of scenarios, right? So this is there as a must. We also require you to include a plan. As I said before, it's that early thinking, how you plan to get closer to the market. And of course, when you plan to design experiments as part of use cases, we expect that those will happen in real-world environments, right? So we wouldn't be so keen to see, for example, a demonstrator on paper or a nice simulation running on a high-performance machine, right? So it's more than that. Think about the real environments, real conditions, or realistic conditions at least. The other bit I mentioned about the product aspect, or can be a process improvement, can be a service, if you like, can be combinations. It's your choice, but that has to be fleshed out at the proposal stage, right? So show us how you will go about bringing that commercialization aspect. And again, the balance between how much you focus on technical, how much you focus on social, and dependencies, of course, in between those and the economic impact. And so these are the themes that open for this round 2. Those are priority themes, which means that those 4 million will be split into those 2 themes. We expect ideally, round numbers, 2 million will go to 1, 2 million will go to 2. Realistically, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more, but that's the expectation. Two priority themes. One is about cyber-resilient IoT systems for critical national infrastructures. I'll come back to that in a minute. And the second one is the secure and energy-efficient IoT systems, again, that operate in resource-constrained environments, conditions, and so on and so forth. Now, as a reminder, yes, you have to include, it might sound sometimes surprising, to include AI in those work plans for the demonstrator, but yes, this is an expectation that we would like to see. And of course, you can include complementary technologies like distributed ledger technologies, 5G mobile networks, applications of 5G mobile networks, and so on. So you select those complementary technologies according to the scenarios. Ultimately, it has to be relevant to the cybersecurity and IoT, if you like, nexus, as I said before. Now, I mentioned before about the IoT systems, and this is your way in, if you like, in an application. Because the first thing we'd like to see before anything is how you understand the world in terms of an IoT system. What does it mean to you, right? So show us what you understand in terms of what's an IoT system, and then move on to kind of focus on those elements that you will be developing in your proposal. It doesn't matter out there in the open literature, you will find reference models, you'll find different schools of thought and so on. As long as you present a credible, if you like, presentation of what's a system for you, that's fine. Typically, you can see that the world is partitioned into layers. Cybersecurity tends to be a cross-cutting element. But as I said before, we expect that you will present that credibly in your proposal, the notion of an IoT system. Theme 1 focuses on the cyber resilience, and I emphasize that. The emphasis is on national critical infrastructures, IoT, industrial IoT, to be more precise if you like. You might call it cyber physical systems, that's fine, it's up to you, but it all kind of falls under the IoT class in a way. Those systems that support the control and maintenance and the monitoring of those national critical elements, critical assets. There is growing evidence, if you like, that the attacks, the cyber attacks and the threats are growing, are evolving, are changing fast. And if you consider the attack vectors and the disruption vectors, those come in different tiers, if you like. So those can be the known aspects, what you know about that you are vulnerable, and you can solve it in a way by adding, let's say, more rules to a firewall. That's fine. But increasingly more unknown elements, right? So you don't know, when and where you will be vulnerable. Or also the adversary created type of vulnerabilities. And it is exactly those two latter vulnerability types that they change the whole thinking from the traditional notion of security, of building higher walls to protect the system, moving to systems that can withstand and survive potential adversity, including failure, faults, and of course threats and cyber attacks. So in this theme, the aspect of resilience is, or we expect to be, if you like, built into the system architecture or system design. And that will allow a system to be able to operate even if it's partially compromised. Okay, so you may be operating with an adversary already having breached into your defenses, yet you will still be able, through resilience, to deliver an acceptable level of mission essential delivery. So that's the expectation here. I'm setting the scene. It's for inspiration, it's for guidance, and it's up to you to reflect and come up with those excellent proposals. But again, let me stress here that resilience is part of the system architecture and system design. Okay, so it's not a self-standing notion. It's framed around the notion of an IoT system, and then you will be thinking about design, architecture, system engineering, and so on. Things to remember: the IoT systems, by now, hopefully it stayed in memory. What's an IoT system, where you focus as part of that, and also explain within the proposal the what and why you deem critical. Okay, as part of the infrastructure, as part of the deployment of your use cases, why and what is critical from your standpoint. Theme number 2, we acknowledge, if you like, that there is a trend. If you see some projections from different companies, different organizations, at the minute, the human and machine generating data exceed the capacity of data centers to process and store this data, if you like. So that's a projection and a trend. You can see quotes of exceeding that amount by a factor of 4 or whatever. But the thing is that we generate more useful data that are potentially being wasted, right? And the other trend is that the processing, transmission processing and storage of that data is becoming unsustainable by shifting everything to the cloud. Is becoming unsustainable from an energy viewpoint, energy consumption viewpoint. And so this is where the edge deployment, the edge components come into play, that they might offer solutions, but they also present challenges as well. Those edge devices may be energy constrained, maybe not, but in this theme, we are focusing on those scenarios where you operate under an energy limited envelope, yet you need to ensure that the system is secure. So it's that, if you like, dual objective optimization. But you need to be secure given that you operate under a limited energy budget or energy envelope, as I said before. And of course, AI is stressing that, if you like, already existing challenge in the sense that those algorithms need a tremendous amount of processing power. And as I said before, sending that back to the cloud and then back again to the edge to take the decisions is unsustainable energy-wise. So remember here, what's an IoT system for you again? And think about not those two elements in isolation rather than the combined of the two that you operate securely under energy constraints. And I'll come to my final slide before I hand over to my colleagues. What's not in scope? We presented the two themes that are in scope. What's not in scope is, first of all, the user development of quantum technologies, including QKD, quantum key distribution. Why? Because we have dedicated programs that take care of those elements quite thoroughly, if you like. The quantum technologies, ISCF, Wave 2, Wave 3, and so on and so forth. We have the quantum technology hubs, so this is not part of this competition. We do focus on critical infrastructures, but we don't call for development of yet another new facility, if you like, or new infrastructure, so that's out of scope. And we also exclude the development of network infrastructure per se, 5G or beyond or whatever. But as I said before, you can use applications using 5G as part of your scenarios. I think I'll pause here and then hand over to...
We're going to take some Q&As,
Are we?
actually. Yeah.
Even better.
I'm just going to grab a mic. Stay.
I think I'll stay here because you have the camera,
yeah.
yes.
Hold the mic. The mic's on. Great. Okay. So there's... I have to be careful not to hit my head. Thank you for that. That was really helpful in the competition scope. But I imagine that there may be some questions. There might be some people who are thinking, well, how does what I want to do fit into the competition scope? So this is your opportunity to ask George particular questions, and if I could ask you a favour, which is please don't ask questions on eligibility for your organisation or the application process, because that will be coming after George's colleagues from Innovate UK go through the application process with you. But if you have questions on scope, or clarification, now's the time to do it. Another favour, if you could make sure that there's a question mark at the end of your question, please, because George has actually sort of asserted some trends and some forecasts that has led him to the conclusions about the scope here, and that was kind of helped by an industry day that we ran back in December. But you might have some feelings and comments about those assertions. Happy to hear those, but please, if you could ask the questions about scope and activity, that would be very useful.
Name and affiliation.
Yes, of course, yeah, and your name and the organisation that you're from. And finally, there's a microphone coming to you. If you could wait for the microphone. So your name and your organisation and your question, please.
Jeremy Bennett, Embercosm. On your slide, you said applications up to 4 million. Do you have a preferred application size? Because I know sometimes you have a limit, but actually you don't want them too small and you don't want them too big, and 4 million would certainly take 40% of your pot in one go. So do you have a preferred size for the applications?
There's no preference, and my colleagues will go through the window if you like. You can't claim more in terms of costs, but there is a cap in terms of the grant funding. So that's the fixed element, if you like.
Sir, yeah. Yes, you're... No, you've got the mic, so you might as well say who you are and where you're from and what your question is.
Alec Robertson, Design Futures. There's quite a technological thrust there, although the mention of human element in the system is important. Human element can be a weak link or a strong link, particularly with resilience in terms of adaptive identification of attack. Could you say a little bit more about how much of this system can be looked at from a human point of view?
Yeah, that's a very good point indeed. And of course, the assumption is that resilience has different levels, if you like, depending how you look at it. The expectation is not to solve everything by machines and by algorithms, of course. The human element may be inside your, in the way you frame resilience. We are not putting a threshold, if you like. If you think it's important, if you think that this is linked to the criticality aspect, then by all means do bring this out clearly. And ultimately, it has to kind of interplay with the technical element as well. So no limits, but then up to you to justify and linked to the criticality aspect.
Alec, does that answer your question okay? Yeah. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Hi, Martin Hawley from Winsland. Really picking up what Jeremy just said there, actually. It looks like in the first phase, you had 3 projects that were 6 million, so an average of 2 million each. And this phase, you're looking for a project in each area. Yeah. Is it basically, it's a 2 million project in each one, so you're looking for 2 projects? Is sort of my first question. The second question is, are those 3 projects, are they really big business projects, or are they consortia projects?
Yeah.
And probably one for later, but you can drop this one, is if it is that, is it the same application process that has 400 words in the box and then
well,
the
Martin,
evaluators?
we'll leave that for later.
Yeah.
Because flinging 3 different questions.
But they're very contextually related, so, but yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
So in terms of the budget, the expectation is that we will allocate ideally evenly the 4 million between those 2 topics based on excellence, right? So if we find that, the topic, whatever X, is not up to scratch in terms of submissions, we'll take the portfolio approach and probably put those 4 in the other one that may have excellent submissions. So yes, the idea is to split it evenly. But also depending on the assessment and the excellence is how we will decide ultimately.
But the lesson from the past is that you
Martin,
just one big project in each box, really. So that's what I wanted to get out of it.
Yes, I don't know which past you have in mind, but I'll give you the past of round one. Round 1, yes. So round 1, we had 3 topics. The expectation was the same, the even distribution. It so happened that number 3, I think the digital home didn't attract much interest, and then we kind of folded back the budget to 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
thank you. There's a question, sir, in front.
Duncan Purvis from 2 Insight. Is it your expectation or requirement that AI is deployed to the edge in any proposals?
Yeah, well, as I said, not necessarily. We are, I kind of highlighted the trends, right? So I think it's related to your scenario. So if you envisage an edge deployment, then that would be the case, right?
Okay, because it could actually conflict with the requirement, or not requirement, but if the device is constrained, it's probably not going to be able to support AI at the edge. Yes. And you seem to imply that you're expecting it has to be at the edge.
There's no application. I was very clear in that that was just for inspiration. I said it might be the edge, might not be the edge, so please don't take it as a hardwired assumption from my part. That slide was to give you a bit more element rather than saying it's 1 or 2, right? So don't put me on the spot for that, please. I mean, I meant to be friendly.
Bill Aronson from Artificial Intelligence Research Group. Kind of a follow-on question from the previous speaker. With AI and machine learning, clearly if you have a project which has a component in it that's within scope, but what about the reverse? If you have something which doesn't have any AI or machine learning in it, but is designed to be protected against machine learning, is that also in scope?
Yes, well, interesting point again, and thank you for that. So I'll give you an example. So for example, the theme 1, right? You can envisage, hypothetically, I'm not taking you to certain directions, I'm just giving you food for thought. You can have AI used as an adversarial AI, right? Producing threats for a given system. That's fine, that's in scope. But you can have AI used as part of the system design, right? Or the system operation in terms of the resilience. How do you recover, how do you absorb and recover those threats, those attacks, using AI? Okay, so it can be multi-fold, if you like, how you approach that.
And I think, George, what we're picking up is that you're framing the problem
yes,
rather than
it's framing the problem.
Solution.
Yes.
And we want to hear what potential solutions are.
Indeed, but the overarching, if you like, or the underpinning element is that you have to be specific on the IoT system understanding, right? So that's a given. All the other are framing what you should be thinking or not, because there may be things that I didn't cover here that, are valid and merit attention. So.
Thank you. A question over.
Richard, do we have any other one? So we'll take one here first and then you can go.
Hi, Barry Johnson for Coventry University. I just wanted to question the word demonstrator, which tends to quite often mean public. Are there any requirements in terms of accessibility or public demonstration or that kind of thing, more than there would be in a standard, Innovate call?
Yeah, well, the demonstrator aspect here, well, it's all public. It's public money and it's public. Everything has to be transparent and public and so on. But it's more about how your problems link to, let's say, productivity gain, productivity increase, anchored on end-user requirements. So your starting point, as I said before, would be, how do you bring in those end users to kind of flesh out those requirements? Now, it can be requirements at a top-level fashion. There's an industry X has a very specific view on how they maintain security, and what kind of problems they have. But it can also be bottom-up. So you may have some requirements that apply in a cross-cutting fashion that merit the demonstrator approach. And then you can have a number of, let's say, representative use cases across fintech, across automotive, again, as hypothetical examples.
So that doesn't necessarily mean to say that's a public spectacle, but a demonstrator of the research and development question. Be nice to have an industry stakeholder in there. Be nice to demonstrate the efficacy of the R&D.
Yes, it's not something that you will exhibit in a museum or in an exhibition hall or whatever. It's a research and development project, and the aspect of the demonstrator are linked to, as I said before, the end user involvement, being closer to market, and thinking if your favorite language is TRL, think increased maturity levels, if you like, and not starting with -1 or 1 or 2, but go a bit beyond. But again, I won't go into that discussion because it's very subjective.
And just to sort of ask on your behalf, that test bed environments, is that out of scope or in scope, or you prefer that? You mentioned a live environment here.
Yes.
So how do you feel about sort of industry test beds?
So a test bed can be part of a demonstrator, if you like.
Yeah.
In a real or close to real environment.
Real or close to real.
Not in a laboratory showcasing a robotic manipulator or whatever. It has to happen outside the lab, as I said before.
Okay, very helpful. Thanks, George. Richard, did you have some questions coming in from online?
Indeed, we've had a couple. A short one, I think, George. Are applications allowed broadly the same as in phase 1?
Broadly the same. You can argue and assume that based on the conditions and eligibility. What changes is the priority themes and the slightly crispier view of the IoT systems,
right,
which was not necessarily made in round 1. So those are the main differences, I would say.
Thank you kindly. And the second one, and bear in mind we only live 10 years, please could you go over the definition of IoT systems? Well, for the purposes of this call, anyway.
Yes. So, well, I couldn't possibly go into that path, if you like. I know that we are live on the web stream. I don't want to go back on the slides, but there's a plethora of resources, if you like, in terms of, as I said, reference architectures as part of standards, as part of independent studies, and so on. So it's up to the applicants to use their frame of reference. I said that before. You may come from a computer science background. That's fine. An IoT system can look different from an electrical engineering point of view, or a telecoms engineering, or a cognitive science engineering point of view. So it's up to you to come up with that definition and understanding, of course, using credible arguments.
And there'll be a section in the application which will be a question around scope. So that's actually
Yes.
a very important question. So for those of you hoping to apply, just make sure that your application is within the scope of what you've presented, because that's a kind of gateway question, yeah?
That's a good point, and that will be touched upon in a while from the competitions team about the scope, yes, and the process.
Thank you. Are there any further questions around scope or questions around clarification for George? Or no? Well, in that case, we'll move on. George, thank you. Give him a clap. Thank you very much. So you've been very disciplined at not asking too many questions about the application process and eligibility, but now actually we're going to hear from the Innovate UK competitions team. And Dawn and Elaine are coming to the stage to tell us all about it. Or thank you. If you'd like to welcome you to the stage, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Dawn Manson. I'm the portfolio manager for this competition. Right, let's get going. Eligibility criteria. The lead must be a UK-based business, at least one UK SME, must be collaborative with other business research organisations, public sector organisation or charities. You must carry out your project in the UK and exploit the results from or in the UK. The project costs are between 2 million and 4 million, and we're only allowing you to claim a maximum of £2 million grant. The project length is between 18 and 24 months. These are the types of organisations that Innovate UK fund. The amount of funding you can receive all depend on which of these categories you fit into. In order to be eligible to receive state aid, you must pass the Undertakings in Difficulty test. This only applies to limited liability companies that are more than 3 years old. If you have a parent company, the test can be performed on your parent or holding company. You should make sure your business is eligible before you submit an application. If you are successful in the competition, we will apply this test as part of your viability checks. If you're unsure of whether you're eligible to receive state aid, please seek legal advice. Further information is available on our website, and you can also contact our support team if you have any questions. The state aid for this competition is Article 25, and the relevant research category is industrial research and experimental development. These are the eligible costs covered. Please remember that at least 70% of total eligible project costs must be incurred by business. If you are an academic or RTO in this consortium, the maximum level of project costs is 30%. If there's more than one, they would share the 30% between them. Research organisations are not able to lead in this competition, but may partner in as many applications as they wish. What is collaboration? There must be evidence of a genuine collaboration. You'll need to explain in your application how all parties will contribute to the project and benefit from the collaboration. Any one business may be involved in up to 3 applications to this competition, but can only be the lead partner in one application. A research and technology organisation cannot lead an application in this competition, but can be a collaborator in any number of applications. Innovation leads will consider your application of resubmission if it is not materially different from the previous application, and your application is classified as a resubmission if it was previously deemed out of scope for another competition. However, if you were previously ineligible, for example, having project costs over the funding limits, this wouldn't be deemed a resubmission. If you have an outstanding final claim and/or an independent accountant report, on a live Innovate UK project, you will not be eligible to apply for grant funding in this competition as a lead or a partner organisation. If you applied to a previous competition as the lead or sole company and were awarded funded by Innovate UK, but did not make a substantial effort to exploit that award, we will award no more funding to you. These are the key dates to bear in mind for this competition. It is important to note that the submission deadline is at noon on the dot. IFS will automatically close, and so at 12:01, applications can't be submitted. We strongly recommend that you submit your application as early as possible, as traffic will be high on deadline day. Can't emphasise that enough. Please contact customer support in advance of the deadline if you experience any difficulties with submitting your applications, so that we can assist you in good time. So, the Innovation Funding Service. When you click Apply on the competition webpage, you'll be directed here. Use the keyword search to find the competition you are interested in. Click the title, then it opens the competition. Click on the competition to see the tab view of the eligibility criteria, scope, key dates, and information on how to apply. When you're happy to apply, simply press Start New Application. To apply for a competition, the lead applicant will need to create an account. If you've applied for previous competitions on IFS, you can simply sign in. You can use Companies House to look up to search for your organisation to save typing in the name and address. If you're not on Companies House, you can manually enter your information. We advise that research organisations and academics and universities manually enter your information so that you're not listed as a business on IFS, and ensure you receive the correct funding. So, overview of the first section, project details. Application details. Please make sure your research category is correct, as this is used to calculate your grant value. Project summary. Highlight the need or challenge, approach and innovation, and the outcomes. Key to setting the scene for the assessors is to give them an overview of your vision. Public description. Published if your project is successful. Please be aware of confidentiality here. Scope. It's important that your project is within scope to receive funding. Please use this field to justify how your project fits the scope for assessors. If you're unsure as to whether or not your application is in scope for this competition, please do contact customer service. Section 2 questions. There's 10 questions, cover 3 key areas which we'll run through in a bit more detail over the next few slides, and then can be found under the How to Apply tab. Please note very detailed guidance is associated with each question on IFS, and questions 2, 3, 7 and 8 allow for appendices which are limited to 1 megabyte in size. And now I'm going to hand you over to Elaine Kirby from Project Finance.
Hello, my name's Elaine Kirby and I'm the Project Finance Team Manager. All applications for review come through my team. We carry out 3 different reviews on each application. It's the UID test, the viability, which includes companies' ability to match fund, and also the eligibility, which is around the project costs to be included within the project. So that's basically what we're going to be looking at today. I'll keep it at a fairly high view because the detailed guidance can be found on our website, and if I give you a few hints and tips of the type of elements that my team are looking for, it may help your applications get reviewed that much more quickly. So to be eligible for funding, you must be a UK registered business. So as you'll see, companies beginning with the prefix of FC, BR or JE are not eligible. Sole traders and partnerships can also enter competitions, providing they can provide evidence that they have been trading. So if we look at the labour table, what's included here is all of the people you intend to have working within your project. So we look for the role of those people, not the individual names. The costs to be included are the gross employee cost, not the salary cost alone. Some applicants have misunderstood that previously and then found themselves out of pocket. So what can be included is the gross employee cost. So that's your basic salary, employer's contribution for national insurance and pension and any healthcare premiums, that type of thing. So that goes in as the gross employee cost. System automatically calculates a day rate for those people. If you have more than one person of the same type working within a project, so say 6 engineers, put them all in on one line. As long as their salaries aren't too far apart, then you can use an average cost for those engineering roles, that type of thing. The days that you intend people to be working within the project, we do appreciate that at the time of making application, all of these costs have to be on best estimate. You can't be exact at this stage. So we do expect change requests to come through later on when the project gets going. Some of these roles may vary depending on the way the project is progressing and the needs within the actual project activities themselves. The items that are ineligible to be included within labour are any dividends, bonuses or non-productive time. Right, if we move on to overheads, there are different ways that you can claim your overheads. This is always a bit of a contentious area, and we tried to design the form so that it was suitable for any type of business to include their relevant overheads in the relevant sections. So if you choose not to elect the 20% overhead, then basically you will be asked to complete this form. Overheads are in 2 sections. The main section is the overheads attributable to those people listed in the labour table. So we would expect you to be including your day-to-day rates for those people. That would include all the usual type of overhead associated with having a person within your business, office facilities, utilities, IT, laptops, equipment, all this type of thing. Anything that the back office or the core infrastructure teams are going to be undertaking, for those costs to be eligible, they must be additional and caused basically through the project activities. And that really is quite the difficult part to be able to demonstrate within the application. We quite often find that we have senior people who wouldn't normally be subject to time recording, will be included within the project, but they are actually identified within the business as indirect people. So what we would suggest is if you can identify what those senior people are going to be doing within the project, add them into the labour table, stating the number of days they're going to be performing the activities within the project. And for the time records, all we would ask is the project manager keep a record of the days or the hours that those senior people have been engaged on project activities, and that would be enough to make the claim for their costs. Material costs, again, this is an area where we often don't get the level of detail that we need to be able to sign off the project reviews. All the elements within the cost areas, we need a certain level of detail to be able to qualify what's being included, but also for transparency requirements and audit purposes. So in all the sections, please do enter in a relevant level of information to help us do our reviews. We'll get them through that much more quickly with the information included. Quite often in this section, we'll see one line, project materials, £500,000. And, you know, there's no way that we could possibly sign that off. So we have to come back to you for a more detailed breakdown. If you've already got something within your project file that lists all of the pieces of material you're going to be using, by all means, upload a copy of that spreadsheet or whatever. Just indicate in here that there is something attached. We can work from that document to save you having to do any additional detailed work. Capital equipment. So with Article 25 projects, what we fund is the usage of equipment within the business. So we need to see these pieces of equipment listed. We need to have a current value, whether it's a new piece of equipment or an existing piece of equipment, the expected residual value at the end of the day, and your normal depreciation period for this type of equipment. So you may be running a 2-year project, but the piece of equipment you're including could be classed as having a 36-month write-down period. So we would expect to see the 2/3 entered within the project. The other thing to take into account with capital usage is that if you're writing it down to a 0 value, you must give us a justification, because capital usage costs going into a project should, in most instances, reflect your own company depreciation policy. So anything that's outside of your normal depreciation periods for those pieces of equipment, we need to know why they're coming in at a lower value. It may be because you're going to change the piece of equipment for use in the project, in which case it could determine the change in the value at the end of the day, or you could be using it to such an extent that it's going to be totally worn out at the end of the project. So we just need to understand why you're stepping away from your normal depreciation terms. The other thing to identify within the capital equipment usage is the utilisation within the project. You may have a piece of equipment you're only going to be using for 50% of the time within the project. The rest of the time it can be used within the business. So we will only fund the 50% that is applicable to the actual project costs, to the actual project activities rather. SubContractors, again, an eligible cost. Also, this is another area where it can be very difficult to identify the subcontractors you're going to need further on through the life of your project when you're making the application. So we ask you to list the subcontractors if you possibly can. If you can't, then please supply us with a preferred suppliers list with the intention of choosing those subcontractors from that preferred suppliers list. Should you later on during the project find that actually the subcontractors you decided to use are no longer available, they're busy, they can't come work with you, please engage with your monitoring officer to notify them of the change of subcontractor, and if necessary they will refer it back to project finance through a PCR route. Normally, the subcontractors are only referred back to us if they're offshore. So if they're non-UK businesses, you're taking the subcontract element overseas, we would need to have a justification of why it's not possible to get these services here in the UK. It's not ineligible because it does happen, but we just need to have that justification recorded within the system, and then everything's fine. If subcontract activities are to be obtained from a company who is linked with your business, so whether it's a company within your group of companies, your parent company, even if it's linked by way of ownership or directorship, we would expect the charges to be at cost. Okay, travel and subsistence, again, quite eligible for those people listed in the labour table. So we would expect to see the elements of travel included here on a broken down line by line. So we have a line for travel, a line for any rail travel, a line for flights, accommodation. Please list them all separately because it makes it much more sort of speedy for us to be able to do our reviews. We can see instantly what is required. All travel must be on economy basis, best value for money. And as I say, it must be applicable to those people within the labour table. One of the items that we quite often see is attendance at conferences, particularly overseas conferences, trade shows, exhibitions, this type of thing. For the travel to be eligible for those functions, we do need to understand exactly the benefits that will come back to the project itself. So if you're going to a conference to speak about your project, fabulous, that's great, let us know. If it's something you would attend in any event, because it's a conference within your normal sector area, but this year you're hoping to promote the project activities and all this type of thing, we may be able to come to an agreement whereby we could say fund that trip by 50%. But unless it's wholly necessary for the outcomes of the project, then you mustn't include them. Okay, but again, give us the information, let us know. A lot of things are, justifiable. So the more information we get, the quicker we can make the judgments and get your project applications through process. So other costs are basically, this is an area for anything that doesn't fit in the earlier categories within the project cost form. We're finding lots and lots of businesses now are using this section for bringing in facilities costs, which is really quite useful. It saves you having to list all the pieces of equipment within equipment usage, certainly some of the materials. So if you have a workshop or a laboratory, a production line, that type of facility that you're going to be using within your project, and you know the daily cost of just having that facility available, then we can have that included in this section. Just give us the basis on how it's calculated. If this has been qualified by, say, your auditors to be used as the basis for your billing for other commercial ventures, then all well and good. So we do actually have applicants that use this section. They just list all of their different facilities, and then on top of that, they list their labour to be included within the project and their materials, and then basically that's it, because all of their overheads are basically tied up within the facilities costs. So it really comes down to what's best for your business. The other item that can be included in here is for SMEs only, IP filing costs for the IP resulting from the project. So, and that's available for SMEs only. So this really can be an area of the application that can cover all sorts of different things that don't naturally fit in other places. So I think that's the last one. Yep, I'll hand you back to Dawn.
Right, funding. As previously mentioned, the level of funding awarded will depend upon the type of organisation and the type of research being undertaken in the project. IFS will calculate your grant percentage based on your answers inputted. As a reminder, the amount of funding you are eligible to receive is dependent upon your organisational type. Just leave that slide up there for a couple of seconds. Okay, here is an example to show how the funding rules might work for an industrial research CR&D project. Academic partners. Academic partners in your consortium will need to complete a JES form, which they should be familiar with. The form validates costs for us. Innovate UK don't have access to the JES system to extract information ourselves, which is why this needs to be sent to us. When they've completed their JES form, academics will need to include their unique reference number on IFS and input their figures. Please ensure the figures you provide are identical. Form must be with council status and uploaded to IFS as a PDF. You must also ensure the academic partners complete the justification of resources and pathways to impact on the JES form, as this is information the assessors look for. Any questions on JES, please call or email the JES help desk. Okay, submitting your application. This is a summary of the project costs available to all organisations in the project. You will not be able to see any more detailed breakdowns of anyone else's costs, and this is also what the assessors will see. For collaborative applications, IFS will highlight to the lead applicant any partners who have outstanding project finances to complete. All finances must be included in the application before the lead applicant can submit. It will also check that your research participation costs are within the required limits. IFS does not validate project costs. It is your responsibility to ensure all costs are within the eligible total project costs as stated in the brief and guidance. We're able to track the site usage and submission uploads. This table shows the number of applicants submitting their proposals each hour leading up to the noon deadline. As you can see, the majority of applicants leave it to the final hours. We strongly recommend submitting your application early, in good time, to avoid any last-minute technical issues. Remember, it closes it on the dot. This competition does allow resubmissions, and we have included what constitutes a resubmission on this slide. It is best to double-check before you submit your application. Assessments. The application is assessed. This involves a scope check, then a review by up to 5 independent assessors, feedback collation into final score, and interview. Assessors tell us they want clarity, detail, justification, and to see that the applicant has presented a viable opportunity for growth with an exciting innovation where public funding will make a real difference to developing their idea, and that they have the right people and the right approach to run a successful project and exploit the results. Answer the questions in the guidance so the assessor can award you the maximum marks. Even if you have a fantastic idea, if you don't answer the questions, you won't score well. Make sure your application reads well. You want the assessors engaged and interested in your proposal. Get them excited about your idea. They may be reading lots of applications, so make yours stand out. The feedback is compiled using the written comments of the independent assessors who review and assess the applications. It is intended to be constructive in nature and to highlight both the strong as well as the weak areas of your application. Please bear in mind that because applications are assessed by a number of assessors, you may receive information which appears to be conflicting. This may reflect their different interpretations of the proposals you have submitted. It must also be noted that some proposals may appear to have been favourably assessed based on their comments. In such instances, it could be that your proposal simply fell below the funding threshold, with others achieving a higher merit score overall. We review scores and feedback to check assessors are adhering to our guidelines and scoring fairly. In some cases, where we feel a score is unjust and not supported by feedback, we may remove that score as an outlier and update the total score for the application. Please be aware that both low and high outliers may be removed, and as a result, scores may increase or decrease. This is an excerpt from a panel sheet, and this is a sheet that is created when we have all the assessments in. The right-hand column shows the score for a particular application, and the highlighted column shows the score spread. This is a difference between top and bottom scores. The next two columns let us know where an application has been marked out of scope or not recommended for funding. If there is a 3 or more appear in either of the two columns count of no scope or recommended, we review the application's detailed scores and feedback to check why this has happened and if it is justified. The green box highlights a particular assessor score. The purple box highlights the set of scores for a particular question. We look for a difference of 20 or more within the assessor's total score to identify an outlier. At first glimpse, we would consider assessor 3 to be the outlier with a score of 62, but this must be backed up by the feedback. The lead will be notified when your feedback is available. They will go into their IFS dashboard to review the feedback. If you're invited to progress to an interview, you can bring up to 5 people to attend the interview. You'll have 20 minutes to present a maximum of 20 PowerPoint slides with no videos or embedded links. And there's a 30-minute question and answer session led by members of the panel. You will have the opportunity to respond to the assessor feedback so the panel can read it prior to the interview. The response to feedback, presentations and presenters' names will have to be provided ahead of the interview. These are the project setup stages that need to be completed by all partners within 30 days. You can start project setup as soon as you've been notified that you're successful. Projects should start within 90 days. We no longer issue a conditional offer letter after a notification, as organisations are signing up to our terms and conditions when they actually submit their application. The lead has visibility of the progress of all partners and so has the responsibility of pushing through. The lead will need to provide a collaboration agreement and exploitation plan. Each partner should provide their bank details and a finance contact. Project team. Each organisation can add new people into the project to be listed as either the finance contact or project manager. Individuals can allocate themselves and can take on both roles if they choose. Applicants can only be able to invite people from their organisation to join the project. We will assign you a monitoring officer who will be your main point of contact throughout the project. We will also review your finances to check your costs are eligible and the businesses involved are legal entities and can meet their match funding requirements. Communication at each stage will be through IFS if there are any issues, so please ensure all details are correct, up to date and regularly monitored. In order for us to ensure we are paying the correct organisation, we need to verify the bank account we will be paying your grant into. The simplest way of doing this is to provide a copy of a redacted bank statement. We're not interested in looking at the transactions going through your account. It's simply confirmation the company name you use when creating your application matches that which appears on your company bank account. You cannot make a change to your project before the project starts. So if you need to change a partner or move costs around before you can start, the funding will be withdrawn and you will need to reapply into a future competition. All project partners will be required to complete project setup and we will require you to provide key information relating to your project and consortium. To avoid delays, we recommend that you consider who will be the project manager, who will be the finance contact for each consortium member, and how your consortium will be set up. We frequently see that projects get held up by the collaboration agreement, so start thinking about this while you're creating your application. On the slide are a few key areas that you'll need to be agreed amongst your consortium. We are unable to issue a grant offer letter without it. We're nearly there. If you are successful and start your project with grant funding, you'll need to be aware of the fact that we pay your claims quarterly in arrears. If you are a small organisation, be wise to manage your cash flow. This can catch small companies out as some projects can incur significant costs up front. The pattern of claim payments can impact on cash flow as paid quarterly in arrears. Another thing to bear in mind is that all costs have to be incurred and paid between the start and end date of the project. You cannot claim for costs before the project has received confirmation to start or after it has finished. Project change requests. Significant change will be partner dropout changes. I think that is the last slide, and here are some useful contact details if you have any problems. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I think Tammy's going to come up as well, so
Yeah, good.
help us out.
Hi, Tammy and Simon. You've got a couple of mics for us. Hi, Tammy. So first of all, thank you, because that was comprehensive. And I think especially the way that you went through the competition assessment process, just so that there's complete clarity about how applications are going to be judged. And also, I think there are some questions, you covered off questions about international subcontractors, capital costs, additional costs, facilities costs, that kind of stuff. I am just going to go back to this slide, because this, in a way, the questions and answers and the details about the support team, KTN is happy to help potential applicants answer some questions, but actually the Innovate UK support team is chapter and verse the right place to go to answer your questions. And I think the support team has a deadline to turn around questions in, is it 48 hours or 72 hours or
3 days?
3 days. Yeah. I'm going to give you a microphone, so at least you're mic'd up, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So are there any questions? There was a question earlier, I think, was it Martin? You had a question. If you just wait for the mic, Martin, and then Anita's bringing you one. Thank you for being patient, by the way.
No, thank you. I was just, because this is quite complex and there's lots of, it feels like very much like a consortium approach. I was just wondering, because on my past experience, there are 400 word boxes and there are 8 questions to be answered in them. So so I just wondered how, that works now. But I think you also said something earlier that the appendices are limited by size in megabytes, not by the number of pages.
No, they are limited by the number of pages.
Okay, as well. Okay.
Yeah, so
right.
it will state, I think some of them are 2, some of them are 4 pages.
Yeah.
And 10 megs is what they're limited to.
Right,
so
okay,
you've got
so
plenty of space for graphics and things like that.
But there is a page limit.
There is.
Still,
so if you
okay.
did submit beyond, then the
Yeah.
assessors would be told to ignore anything further than what you're supposed to put in there.
So what's your feeling about how people write to get, 8 answers in 400 words, which I suppose is a better question?
I think as long, you've just got to be really clear. So, what I find is that lots of consortiums get together, chat offline, and get obviously a big document, and then just break it down. So they've got, obviously, each question has 400 words in this one. And so then they've got their appendices, if required. I really state you must honestly use those appendices if we ask you to fill them in, because you're honestly just letting yourself down if you don't, because that's that extra bit of space to give you and please make sure your font size is kept to as well, because obviously we have that, because we've got, everyone tries to get as much in as possible, so please don't try and give us tiny little fonts, because that's a bit cheeky. Just, it's honestly, you have got enough room. We always ask the innovation leads how much room we'd like, because obviously the more words we have, then the more assessment costs we have. So that's why we try and keep them to a limit. But on the whole, we find that is plenty for those kind of questions that you're getting within this competition. Other competitions, it does vary.
And I think we should acknowledging that squeezing what you want to say into 400 words is challenging. So that's the first thing to acknowledge, actually. But so I'm an ex-assessor for Innovate UK, and before that limit, quite often people, because they're so passionate about their project, would kind of write lots of words, and it does actually bamboozle assessors. So the clarity and the discipline of the word limit does encourage clarity of description, and so I think that's the reason that it's always a balance between what you want to say to describe the specifics of your project versus assessors understanding what you're trying to get across. And I think that's the purpose for the interview as well, which is, after the assessment score, George and his colleagues might invite people to the interview in order to get a bit more information about your application, and that's an opportunity for you to say more there. Yeah. Okay. Another question? Yeah, sir. Your name and organisation, please. Yeah.
Andrew Lindsay from Cerberus Security Laboratories. Regarding the appendices, could you comment on introducing new material, not introducing new material, and information in the appendices? I remember from previous calls they say don't add anything new, but you're also saying use as many of the words as possible and use the space as well as possible.
I think, use the space. It was there for you to use, so make sure you use it. I mean, obviously keep to the point. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's got to be relevant to what you're saying. It's there to bolster what you're supplying to us, to give us that little bit more information. I mean, we are quite clear on what we're asking for in the appendices, so it might be like charts and diagrams to show what your innovation is. It might be a risk register. It might be details about your team, so what skill sets they have and why they are, important to be part of your collaboration. So, as long as you keep to what we're asking, then that's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Anita, there's a gentleman at the back, and then we'll come back to the front, if that's okay. Thank you, sir, for being patient.
Good morning. My name's Colin Mallett of Trusted Renewables. I'd like firstly to say thank you to Innovate UK. I've been involved with projects over the last 10 years, and it's a great team and it had a big impact.
Thank you.
We need to face a brutal fact with this particular competition. There's only going to be 2 projects, which means that most of the people in the room, in my humble opinion, most of the people in the room, their application's going to be unsuccessful, as mine was in the first round. And that means that unless you're going to get more than 8.5 per question, you're not going to be called for an interview. And so one of the comments or questions I'd like is, I have a feeling that if I do another one, I'm going to have to be forced to use a bid writer. And so first question is, what boundaries are it likely to be for somebody to even get an interview? And the next question is, if there's only going to be 2 projects, is there any way that you're going to be able to manage the unsuccessful high-quality projects and perhaps ask the government for more money? And
well, I'm going to ask George to answer your last point, Colin, because I think that's important. I mean, the team here, I think, can pass judgment on how to use bid writers. We may even have bid writers in the room who want to pitch their services later. I mean, I think KTN is happy to look at applications before they go in, just to give a second pair of eyes, and we do that as a service, and Simon's going to say more about that afterwards. But do you want to comment on the use of bid writers, guys?
I mean, it's entirely up to you. I mean, you know what you want to say, so I'd say that's entirely what your choice on whether you use bid writers or not, but you know what you want to do. If you want to put that together with a bid writer, then that's entirely up to you. It's not something we endorse or don't endorse, so, that's up to you.
And can costs of bid writers be recouped from the project? No. They can't, can they? No. So I think that's
the costs fall outside the dates of the project, so they're totally ineligible.
Yeah. So then that's your business decision, I think, if you use a bid writer, to how that gets funded.
But as you were saying, you can send it to KTN. We can't sort of have a check over it for you, but the KTN can have a check over it for you to see what their thoughts are on your application. But we can only advise you on what's in the brief And just all we say is make sure you look at the guidance that's provided in all the questions and make sure you provide a response to each part of that. So you've fully give us as full an answer as you possibly can, really.
Thank you. And George, would you like to come up here? Just so we capture you on camera, on film, for your answer about whether you're going to ask for more money.
But just on the, sorry, thank you. On the second question about the funding and the additional money. So sadly, we don't operate in a continuum funding-wise, right? So the pots are not seamless, so that we can hop from pot to pot and then accommodate more proposals. Sometimes, it may happen that we can have an uplift, but that's for specific investments, right? So we may say we put it up to 4, we may end up in 5 because we saw that the quality was there, but there's no guarantee upfront. So, and the option is the resubmission. You have that allowance to resubmit in any competition that we run. Take take your proposal, model it differently depending on where you target next, and then reattempt. On your first one, and I see Agatha is at the back of the room. So Agatha, would it be possible to just a quick reflection on how did it work on round 1 in terms of interviews? So did we have a threshold? So how did we select the ones that went into the interview? If you happen to know, of course. I don't want to put you into the spot.
So Agatha, would you like to introduce?
Hi, my name is Agata Samoilovic. I'm Deputy Challenge Director for Digital Security by Design. But this program is also kind of belongs to our team. So that was about a year ago. How did we do this? So assessment, yes, and then who is invited to the interview? Yes, that was the question. So first of all, there's a threshold, quality threshold around, is it 70?
70%.
Yeah.
You have to score 70% to actually get anywhere near. That's our quality level.
Yeah, so if you're not going to score close to 70, don't be surprised that you're not invited, because we only consider those that have above 70. Then secondly, the way we looked at it last time, we knew we could fund 3. So we had 3 themes. We looked at quality proposals in those 3 themes, and as George said before, we unfortunately we did select projects from all 3 themes, but unfortunately at the end we only funded from 2 themes. So what we were looking at is the quality proposals, looking from the top, and I think in our case last year we had proposals from each theme that were in the top 5 or top 8. So we didn't have to kind of do the portfolio approach, which, as George said, we would do if, for example, if we have applications above threshold and 5 top applications are only responding to theme 1, then we would go lower and select those from theme 2 to make sure that we actually have proposals from both going for interviews. But it doesn't mean that at the end we would fund both, because if for some reasons we think proposals for addressing theme 1 are so good that, and the theme 2 is not as good, then we would go for theme 1. So it really varies. But what I always think it doesn't matter. Don't think about other proposals. Just try to be as good as you can.
Yeah, I think that's the point, which is that actually if you're outlining the cost and the project scope for the proposal that you want to do, make your proposal the best proposal. And I think if the best proposals are less than £1 million grant funding each, then there may be 3 or 4. It depends on the costing of the proposals, and also I think what assessors are generally quite good at is sniffing out proposals which are poor value for money. So if you're chasing the £1 million grant funding, but your costs aren't realistic in there, then assessors will sniff that out in the assessment process.
So just to finish off is, if we are to fund 2 proposals, we would at least invite 4 proposals for the interview, well, unless the quality threshold is not there. But we would kind of give an opportunity for at least, to have at least to give 50% of chances for those that are going to be going for interviews.
Okay, thanks, Agatha.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any questions? Anita? Just answered your question, sir. Yeah, great. Okay, anyone else with a question? Yeah, sir, thank you. And then after this gentleman, we'll move online to get some questions.
Paul Simmons, Global Identity Foundation. I've got 3 quick questions, I hope. The first one is just checking an assumption. If you're going to award, let's say, 50% of project costs on average across all the partners, you're expecting to see, on the form that's filled in, £3 million for, and you'll award 1.5.
Well, what you need to do is, you'll see, if any of you have actually ever applied for an Innovate grant before, you'll see it has a finance summary at the bottom, and the lead will be able to see that the total at the bottom of the funding sort column, and you need to make sure that that is under 2 million or below, because otherwise we would consider you to be ineligible because you've just gone over our costs. So obviously we've got the rules of between 2 and 4 million for your total project costs, but it's the total grant that
it's the grant cost.
we're really interested in and that you have to make sure you stick to. So you'll see there's a funding sort column, and that's where everyone, so the bottom figure, that needs to be 2 million or less, and then you're fine.
Okay, but to do that, you're expecting to see the total project costs at 2 million, eligibility 50%, therefore you'll fund 1 million. You want the lot, in other words.
We want the whole breakdown, yeah.
Okay.
So you may have to adjust your percentage figures to make sure that 2 million comes in, depending on who you've got in your consortium.
Okay.
And you can always feel free to bring more money into an R&D project.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be the 50%.
So the second one is slightly related. How do you deal with volunteer time?
Volunteer, we don't really... Is this contributions
I think
in
I'm already on. Yeah, are you talking about contributions in kind?
I'm talking about contributions in kind.
Yeah, contributions in kind. They basically, they're outside of the project scope. They used to be eligible, but we took them out of the actual project remit. I think it was April 2014. So yes, you can put in other people's time, whatever, but you're just not claiming the grant off of it. So you can, manage it in that sense. There is no contribution in kind in relation to the match funding, the viability part of the process. Some companies have tried to say, well, look, we're giving our laboratories, there's, X number of hundreds of thousands of pounds. That will be our match funding, but we cannot accept that because that's not physical money to be able to certainly get your project underway. We need to be able to see that you've actually got the cash to be able to fund that first quarter of the project, certainly until you get underway and you can make your first claim. So we don't have contributions in kind as such, it's just levels of actual costs and levels of grant being claimed.
Okay, and the final one, you talked about this quality threshold. Do you publish the scoring sheet for that?
No, we don't publish the scoring sheet, but what we do have, we do show who's got funded, but we don't show who scored what.
So we can't see what your criteria are for meeting the quality threshold.
70%. You have
70% of what though?
Out of 100. So if it's out of 100, you have to score.
I know what 70% is. 70% of what?
Oh, right. Okay. So let's just be clear. There are 10 questions. Each question score 10 points. When you go onto the form, there are subheadings for what the assessors are scoring you the 10 points out of.
Okay.
So those are your criteria against against which you're being assessed. And I think the feedback is the feedback. Do applicants who are unsuccessful receive their score, or do they just receive narrative feedback?
They receive their score and their feedback.
Yeah, so if you're successful, happy days, you probably won't want to go into the nuances of where you did or you didn't score points. If you're unsuccessful, you'll receive both the score against those criteria and narrative feedback from each of the 3 assessors.
But one thing you do need to bear in mind, if you do reapply, it won't necessarily mean you get the same assessors, and they won't be aware of any feedback that you've been provided with previously. Because sometimes we do have, oh, but I did this because of, and obviously we can't really comment on that because they don't get to see that.
Okay. Anita, we're going to go over to Richard. No questions? Fine. Then, hello, madam. Yeah, if you'd like to say your name and which organisation you're from, please.
Erica Yang, Director, Chiltern Computing Limited.
Hi, Erica.
There is a bullet point in the competition text saying that the proposal have to include a plan to demonstrate how you validate, or something like validate in the real world environment, including a plan to do that. Now, my question is, where does that plan naturally fit? Which questions, literally? Is it project management, or is it...
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to George, actually.
We go back to the slide where we have the questions and the... Is it okay if I switch freely?
It might be a large number of clicks.
Indeed. Do you have the printout of the slides? Yes.
I'll try and...
So, I think it's... somewhere here, right? Set up.
It's the first launch.
Thank you.
That's my favourite slide.
Yeah, some people do leave it too late and we really can't accept them. So please don't be one of those.
So you have 4 appendices. I can't remember which ones are must and optional, but anyway, you have Q2, Q3, Q7, Q8. First off, it's up to you. Now, risks, probably not. Project management, probably not. Teams and resources, maybe. Approach and innovation, that would be a good fit, I would gather. So Q2, for example, you can include your planning under Q2 in terms of the near to market and the real world environment experiments.
Thanks, George. And I think you might also, outcomes and route to market, that might be another place to just re-emphasise in Q5, just to re-emphasise, which environment it's going to get to, which environment you're undertaking the R&D and how that's going to go further. Do we have any other question? Oh, hello again.
A quick one about the cost claim and the change request. Now, just an example, my question, if you include in your cost, say, one trip, £100 monthly project meeting, something like that, I include 12, let's say 12 months, so total 1,200 a year. Now, then when I actually do the claim, obviously the cost varies. It wouldn't be 100 or may do 2 travel, so it wouldn't be exact. So at what circumstances do we need to, as a project team, to raise the change request?
No, what we expect is when the application is made, it's made on best estimate, and then when you make the claims, you claim on actuals. So as long as the overall total amount of budget within your travel doesn't get exceeded, then that will be fine.
Right, okay.
So you're okay. The application is for assessing your application. As Elaine says, as long as you don't go over, then you're fine. Yeah,
Okay,
cool.
thank you.
Doesn't need a change request for every train ticket, thank goodness. So, good. Are there any other questions? I think we've covered most of them. So in that case, we're going to end the webinar. Everything up until this point has been filmed. So you can go back, and as you're making your application, there'll be a film of today's session, both the scope stuff from George and also from the competitions team here online. That will all be available. But again, I would urge you to come and speak to people that can help you, either ourselves at KTN or the very, very good support team at Innovate UK, who will get back to you within three days. Please don't leave your applications to the last hour, as you saw that graph. And good luck, and thank you for you three for making it such a fully comprehensive explanation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.